On this episode of the Texas Toast Podcast, we speak with country music legend, Texas legend Deryl Dodd. And as a matter of fact, something happened with this interview. It went so good. You're going to get two parts. So here's the first part with Deryl Dodd right here on the Texas Toast Podcast.
Let's go.
Hello, everyone. We've got Deryl Dodd on the podcast here at the Texas Toast Podcast for this episode. I'm so excited. And just going into this, I've already had grins and giggles visiting with you. Deryl, thank you so much for taking the time to visit with us.
Oh, thank you for having me. I appreciate it. Glad to be here.
Yeah, I have so much to talk about, and I have a feeling that probably all the notes I have and the plans I had will probably just totally get off track. But just kind of going back in your career and looking at everything that you've done, we'll get into everything you've done for the Texas country music industry, but kind of set up things when you transitioned, you went to Nashville and your career took off there. You played with some mighty big names, wrote with some mighty big people to get things started. So talk about your first experience in going to Nashville and getting your career started.
Okay. Yes. Everything happened with me was truly organic. I mean, that word just meaning I never had a plan. I didn't have a manager. I didn't have a headshot or a business card. I just did it. I played. I mean, I grew up around it is where it started. Both my grandfathers were Pentecostal preachers, and they played music, and that's where it all came from: the church and the music. And it was get down music, and bluegrassy Southern gospel, and that's why I picked up on that sound, that style. I love uh, even in the commercial country or the country world, like Ricky Skaggs back in the '80s. When he came out, I was like, that's someone I can really relate to. That was in the country world.
Mhm.
But I started out just playing in the living room. My parents were my dad and his twin brother and my mother had a trio, and they didn't make records, but they played at home gospel music, and they were my living room heroes, I call that. And
Oh,
I just sit right under the feet and watch them when they play. And I had a guitar my dad gave me. It's probably a little plastic thing, and they'd be playing, and I was 4 or 5. I'm flogging away, and I'm sure making noise, and they're like, and my dad, he grabbed the guitar. He said, "Son," he goes, "let me go tune it for you." And he took it in the other room, took the strings off of it. And I was young enough to where, you just imagine. And I was like, wow, it does sound better. I'm
wow.
grooving with y'all now. So anyway, that's a little tidbit about that. But growing up around that, to me, the spiritual and the music are hand in hand. And it's always
Mhm.
been that way with me. It's baked in my songs and everything I've ever done. And I really believe that it was, I was one to say, I was 8 years old and I heard whoever sing, and I thought, oh, that's what I want to do. I mean, it's just something I did all the time. It was just a part of my life, and didn't think of it as I'm going to do this for a living or whatever. Because back then I'm like, how do you do that? How do you get to somewhere where these people would make records and do the whole thing? But I went along and played in high school and kind of got in some bands. I played, I picked up on banjo, steel guitar, anything with strings. It was just like Goodwill Hunting. He said he could just see those math problems. I could just kind of see it and do it, and I could hear it. I had twang in my veins. I was born with that, I guess you'd say. And so I was playing these instruments and got an electric guitar. My dad had an old '63 Strat, and I started playing it. And he said, "Just take it," and I took it and started playing in bands and realized I needed to pick an instrument. And I loved singing harmony because of the gospel and the thing and the family thing. That's either something I guess you can do or you can't. I mean, not trying to make it special, but it's true. Somebody said once I could sing harmony to a train wreck. Just whatever it is, you can find the part. And I love that. I love singing harmony, high harmony, and stuff with people. And so anyway, I got through high school and went to college. That's where really I went to Texas Tech my freshman year, and I met some guys that liked to play back then. This is 1982. The only guitar in the dorm was me, and you just pick up and play with these dudes, and you get inspired. And I started writing songs, and then I transferred from there. My life's been full of contrast: Comanche, Texas; Dallas, Texas; Texas Tech; Baylor University. And I love that because I think God did that for me to just kind of have a wide range of people that you meet and along the way, to where you're not just talking to one audience or whatever. And it's just, I'm just love everybody. So I got in after college. Well, I was in some bands during that time. Of course, went to school barely, but I did play a lot more than I probably went to school. And I started became apparent that I'm assuming this is what I'm going to do. And I was literally in my senior year and my finals. I was always up till 3 a.m. I was just being a vampire was just part of it, just how it was. Late at night, sleep late in the day. It worked perfect for being a musician. But I was sitting there and I was like, what am I going to do with my life? Because all my roommates, they already knew they were finance people, they were, lawyers, whatever. And I was holding my guitar. I always had it with me, just like it's sitting right here. And it was comfort zone. It's just what I did. And it was like another appendage. And I'm like, I'm always doing this. I guess it's going to be this. But I got out of college and got a job at Southwest Airlines and throwing bags on planes. It was a great gig. I love construction work and being around that kind of world. But I was playing on the weekends. I was going back to Waco and playing every weekend in a band. And finally, I just said, I'm going for it because 3 or 4 of us guys, one being Brett Beavers, who you might have heard of,
Yes,
Eric Bentley, and done extremely well. We were great friends in college and playing together. We've written a lot of songs together and love him. But we started a band and went along, and I moved back to Waco to go full time into the whole thing. And that band kind of ended, kind of like the Bryan Adams song, Jimmy quit, Jerry got married. It happens. People move on and they do the thing, and but what I realized, it was like a destiny, is guys, every time something would end, I was like, well, I'm going back home, I'm going to work with my dad or do something. And I get a phone call, hey, we hear you're free or whatever, you want to come play with this band? And those bands were always a little bit more, they had a little more going on, they had bigger audiences and they played more or this or that. So it's just how it went. And early on, I'll just say this, I didn't really care much for being the front guy because I did it, and I knew the people that were there, my friends from college and stuff. I just play what they like. And I think, I'll just say this, music, I think, is a vehicle for me to connect with people. I think that I just love people, and I love to, hey, how you doing? And what's up? And let's play the song and we all join in. It's an inclusive thing, not I'm singing at you. It's never been that way. So after all that and several bands, I was actually about 3 years and playing these, what they call bar bands back then. And there was a lot of bands like Easy Money, which Toby Keith was the lead singer in that band, like 5-piece bands, and Stallion, Jim Collins band. And we were Santa Fe, and Bayou, which had Trace Atkins was the lead singer in that band. So we knew all these guys, and we do these shows, we do these clubs where it's Tuesday through Saturday, San Angelo or Amarillo, up to Calgary. We'd go up to Denver, and we play all over. And back then, that's what you did. And if you wanted to go to the next level, you go to Nashville, because there was no Texas thing and CDs and MySpace or whatever. So, and all my heroes did that back in the day. When I was growing up listening to radio, Haggard and Willie, they were brand new songs. They were, and Jones and Buck and all that. But so I was 3 years probably playing in these bands and stuff, and it kind of ran its course, and people moved away and did some things, and some guys had moved to Nashville, and I just didn't really know exactly how to get there or what to do about that. I didn't really know anyone there, and I was gonna say, okay, it was a good run. I'm gonna go back home and get a job. And a friend of mine who owned a bar in Nashville, in Waco, said that I'm bringing Dean Dillon in to play a show. Dean had gotten a record deal. He's of course written all these hits, but he got a record deal to do his own album, and he came to town. I said, well, she said, I want you to open up, just do like 45 minutes with, get your band or whoever's in town that, you guys can all do the thing. So we did like 45 minutes of covers, and I did the show, not just, well, to meet Dean Dillon, or just to be there, to hear him and do his greatness. And he's doing his show, and he's playing his songs from the album he put out. And we were all just listening. It was packed, and he goes, okay, I'm going to play the songs you want to hear. Here's a George Strait, and here's Keith Whitley, and he's playing all those hits. And man, it's just awesome. And afterwards, I played, like I said, 45 minutes, and I did one original song. And I got finished, and his keyboard player came over to me from the stage. I was over to the side. He said, hey, Dean Dillon wants to meet you. And I was like, I felt like I was in trouble because I used to get in trouble with the principal for some reason. And I thought, what did I do? So I go to the green room, and he's in there, all cool, Dean. And he goes, "Hey, man." I said, "How are you?" And he goes, "Hey, I heard one song you did. It sounded like an original and your own thing." And said, "What was that? Your own song?" I said, "Yes, sir." And I couldn't even believe, "What are you? You're listening? You know, you were listening to us the whole time." It's a God thing. The only way I could say that.
True, true.
And so he said, he said this. That's a damn good song. You ought to come up to Nashville. Come visit. In 2 weeks, this thing called Fanfare goes on. I'll be all over town doing Crook and Chase, all the shows I watched when I was a kid. Crook and Chase
Hmm,
show, the
hmm.
Ralph Emery, and all these things. And I'm going to do all these things. Just get on the bus and ride around with me. Here's how you get there. You drive 40 east, get on Demombrian Avenue. These were instructions. I didn't write it down. There was no cell phones. Get on Demombrian Avenue, go up the hill. There's a Shoney's Inn. Go get yourself a room, and at 8 o'clock Monday morning, my bus will pull up and get on. That was it. 2 weeks later, I drove up there, and I just believed, And I get in Nashville, I'm like, wow, this is Nashville, Tennessee, and where all these music was made that I grew up to and loved. And
Hmm.
so I get in the room, and I stayed up all night looking out the window, thinking I'd miss it, the bus, or be asleep. So sure enough, 8 o'clock they pulled in, and
Oh,
I saw people getting on the bus. Oh, that's the band. I met them in Waco. And then Dean comes out of this cowboy Cadillac, and he's so cool, Manuel jacket, and he just looks. And I walk out there, and hey, and he just kind of went like that, kind of like, get on, And I just got on. Gave me a laminate. I just sat in the front. I didn't want to bother anybody. We went to Ralph Emery. I get out. I just walk on, just kind of know what to do, and just get to the side and watch them do that. And I'm like, I just can't believe this is happening. And actually on that show, I've been playing in bar bands and cover songs, and McBride and the Ride were doing a show. They were on the show. They were brand new. They'd had a couple of hits, and they're standing. They come behind me. I'm like, "It's Terry McBride," And we met because he's from Lampasas, which is right up down the
yes.
road from Mansion.
Hmm.
So I'm like, "Man, I sing your song." He's like, "Cool." And you can count on me. That was one I really loved when I'd sing back then. And anyway, sorry, this long story, but there's so much. But anyway, so that's how I got there. And then while I was actually at the keyboard player's office. He's a publisher as well, and he wanted to hear all the songs I've written, And so I'm in there, and he's on the phone talking to somebody, and there's a guitar, and I pick it up, and I'm just playing it, And a guy walks in to see him, and he walks in and says, "Oh, you're on the phone. I'll come back." And then he looks over at me and goes, "Who are you?" "I'm Deryl." And he goes, "You want a job?" And I was like, "How's this happening?" It's just, I guess, association, or maybe my fingering on the guitar looked really good, and he was like, he can play. But anyway, he it was a situation where back then the Opryland Hotel would book acts to play those bars in the hotel, like 7 or 8 bars all over the hotel. And they were like 3-piece things, And so I talked to him and said, yes. He said, well, any bass players? And Brett Beavers we hadn't been playing together for a few years. I drove back to Texas after that, and I hadn't talked to Brett in a couple of years. He calls me up and says, "Hey, man, I heard you went to Nashville." I said, "Yeah. What are you doing?" "Oh, hello. What have you been doing?" He's teaching school in Tyler, I think. And he goes, "Yeah, I want to get back into music and everything. I just wondering what you're doing." I said, "As a matter of fact, they need a bass player." So we went back up. We went up there, and they had a girl named Amber Ridgway, and she was from upstate New York, and she sounded just like Linda Ronstadt, and she was great. So they put us 3 together,
Mm.
and they said, "Go in another room, learn 3 or 4 songs, come out." And we all did one song each, singing lead, then we could sing harmony and play guitars and bass and all this stuff. And we did like 2 songs. They said, "Oh, you're good, you're in." So they signed us a contract, and we played 6 nights a week. So that moved us up there, got us a job, and we're in Nashville. And I remember playing in there and thinking, "I'm in Nashville, Tennessee. This is so cool," And of course, I'm Mr. Friendly and go getter. And every day during the day, I'd go to places in Nashville and just walk up to places, and meet people. And of course, bars. That's where a lot of it happens. I meet people. And I met Garth Brooks' steel guitar player, and there's a whole story behind that. That's for another thing. How I knew Garth in Dallas, or he was playing in Dallas in 1989, and I pulled up to the bus, and I would normally not do this, but I was like, I'm in the business. That's a bus. I'm gonna go see who it is, and it was Garth in 1989 when his first single was out. His drummer Mike was out there. Of course, I get to know him later, but he was had his cymbals out and he was shining and fixing his drum kit up, and I just pulled up and said, "Hey, who are you playing with?" He said, "Oh, I'm with Garth Brooks." You know, I said, and I just heard of him. I said, "Oh wow." So they were all gone to wash clothes and stuff. So they came in and they came up and I said, "Which one was Garth?" Because I had never seen him really. And he said, "Let's go on the bus." So I go up there and I sit and talk with Garth for probably 45 minutes because he's from Oklahoma, I'm from Texas. And we just talk about music. And the good thing is I'd been playing a lot of venues where they were playing at this time. He was still doing the clubs, but he kind of hit pretty big. And he asked if I play steel guitar, and he asked maybe for me to audition. And I said, "Man, this sounds vain or naive or loyal I was." I said, "Man, my band, if I was to quit this band, my friends said that wouldn't be good." He goes, "Oh, I respect that." So I didn't didn't even try to get the gig. But years later, I meet the steel guitar player who he did hire, and we're sitting at a bar and we're friends. He says, "There's this young lady named Martina McBride that's going to be touring with us. Her husband is Garth's production manager." So that's how that sort of worked out. She used to like sell merch for Garth and all this stuff.
Have you ever wondered how artists like Treaty Oak Revival, Red Clay Strays, and Aaron Watson maintain the high quality and high demand for their merchandise? CH Lone Star Promo is the answer. Created in Texas to serve Texas artists, and they're currently offering 15% off on all merch orders from musicians. Visit chlonestarpromo.com to get started and tell them Texas Toast sent you.
I was reading the other day that it takes at least $1 million to break an artist. That's a ton of change, and it can feel overwhelming. But with social media leveling the playing field, you just need an effective strategy to release your music. Check out Release Rocket to ensure your single does not die after release day. You've already put time, effort, and tons of money into writing and recording your album. Let the guys at Release Rocket keep your new release alive.
So he gave me a tape to learn 4 songs, and I said, "Can Brett, my bass player buddy, can we do it together?" And he said, "Sure." So he gave me 2 tapes. We learned 4 songs. We went on the day to audition, and there was this big warehouse, and there was people lined up around the corner, with their instruments. So we're just the other 2 guys. We said a prayer and probably clinked a Coors Light and stood in line, and we go in and we did the songs, and they had a fiddle player, and everybody was different. The drummer already had the gig, which I was like, "Yeah, man," who I love. I ended up obviously getting the job later and loving him. But we finished that. We got interviewed a little bit, and then 5 days later, John called me, her husband, and said, "Talked for me about 30 minutes about something completely different from music." I was just listening, and I think he did it on purpose because after I got to know him, he's a kidder. And he goes, "Oh, well, by the way, you got the job." And I was like, "Oh, wow." It changed everything. So we're doing arenas for 2 years with Garth all over the United States. And just to say that changed a lot of things, and just to speed up here and not take all your time with this. But I was with them for a couple of years, and then I got off the road, got a publishing deal, and I started writing a lot of songs and with BMG, and met a lot more people and everything, especially on that gig with Garth, because he's now the biggest thing going. And it's amazing the people that show up for a gig like the arena thing, and with Garth was the new thing. Aerosmith's there, Bo Jackson, all these stars are there, and you just get to know them and meet them. It's like, this is a cool life. And I was starting to feel like, I think I can do this. I think this is where I'm supposed to be. I think I'm gonna get a deal at some point, and because it's the first 2 weeks of playing that big thing. I was, I didn't have my sea legs, so to speak, and it's pretty intimidating. 20,000. But after a while, I started stepping out, and I do this, and the light shining, like, because there's so many people. Wow! I was like, "Whoa, this is cool." And then I got really used to it, to where that was just really a cool thing for me to experience, and to I evolved as in the times that were happening. Everybody seemed to be, the big things were going to arenas now, so I felt like that's where I was going to probably be heading, as well as writing songs and all this. And then I got off the road, and then Tracy Lawrence, his guitar player, was leaving, and they just knew me, and they said, "Would you like to come play with Tracy?" So I said, "Yeah." So I went with Tracy, for a couple of years, and that was a whole nother experience. And I sang on his album, like Better Man, Better Off, and sang
Mm-hmm.
harmony on that stuff. And Martina's second album, I sang on that one too. Her producer, Paul Worley, used to come to our shows to see her playing with Garth. And he said, I like the way Deryl sings with you. I want him on the studio. So I love that. That was all just like, I'm just telling you, it was all just happened like that. And I guess I was equipped, but I was certainly not. I mean, I knew where it was coming from, and I'd done this my whole life. So I was prepared for it, and I was a good employee. I was on time, and first of all, I'd been playing in vans and trailers forever and hauling around Texas and everywhere. To be on a bus and you got catering and you're in an arena, and I was just, I mean, come on. I was like, this is pretty cool. So, yeah, I played with Tracy for a couple of years, and then Paul Worley, who was Martina's producer, and we became really good friends. I'd go to his house and we'd play guitar. He had all these great old guitars, and we'd pick and stuff. And he's a player, he's a great player and producer. And he was now with Sony Records, and he saw me across the street on 16th Avenue. I was at EMI going in for something, and he saw me. He ran across the street like I said, it was like Frogger. There's street cars going by, and he was like, whoop, and he gets across to me. He goes sweating. He goes, "Hey, Daryl, I'm with Sony now." He goes, "Man, I want to sign you." I was like, "Okay." So yeah, he's my friend. So I signed a deal with Sony because he was there, and he sort of took me under my wing. I didn't really meet any executives, or I met, the people that do the marketing and the art department and all those things, but he was like, he said, "You're like the Bruce Springsteen of country." He goes, "You're just energetic, and you just,
True. That's true.
I
Mm-hmm.
was like, wow, that's kind of
Mm-hmm.
I'll take that. And so, it went through the process of that and made my first album. I had written a bunch of songs, and he was the reason that I got 9 of my own songs. It wasn't about, I want my songs on there, but he said, "These are you. This is who you are." And that's how I got to Memphis, was a cover. And I grew up with that song. And I just thought, when I'm making the record, I want that to be on there. And well, he was with me that whole process of making the record and everything, and it was all just going great. Well, he gets an offered a deal at Warner Brothers to go and run that label, and it was his home run, so he had to go. And Big and Rich and all that stuff he created, got all that going. So it was a great thing. But when he left, then I started meeting these people I didn't really know, because he was kind of my guy.
Mm-hmm.
And I'll just tell you, they were like, "We're going to take your record and kind of break it up here. We don't know what that song, and One Ride in Vegas. And yeah, we got the songs for you." That's the way that they did it. Paul did it probably the old school way.
Mm-hmm.
So I was talking about contrast. I was like, doing it this way. Well, they didn't do anything as far as changing anything. They put it out probably reluctantly, I'll just say. And it went out, and Friends Don't Drive Friends to Drinking was a song I wrote. And I was like real adamant about my first single. I want it to be country. I want it to be how, I was 31, not 21. And I'm a little older, and, a grown man, and I was singing grown man stuff, and they've kind of, the market, everything had changed to sort of another thing, and demographic and all that sort of business talk. And it makes sense. But the thing was, like, when Memphis came out, it just, I don't know why, it just resonated with people, and they were like, "You're a throwback, and you're sort of at that time, you just like Randy Travis in the 80s, that you're the savior of country music, because it may be gone
Mm-hmm.
a little pop and all the things. Nothing wrong with any of that, but he's just doing himself, and people wanted to hear that thing. And I guess I might have been at that time in 95 been that person, because I got a lot of interviews, and people really want to know what's going on with this guy. But because the song just went to 36, but it was the impact of it.
Yes. Yes.
And we were going to go on to the next single, and they said, "We're going to go do another record." And I was sort of confused. And I went through a divorce, and I wrote the song Bitter End, because that was all a very tough time.
Mm-hmm.
And but I took my own band in. I said, I'm taking because the first album, it's all set up for you, and you have the A-Team, which is great, Brent Mason, Sonny Garish, all these guys. But I did go inside room with them and I played my guitar, like signature licks and stuff. And I remember Brent saying, "Why aren't you playing on this record?" You know, I said, you know, it's the way it is. And anyway, we did the record. Second album, I'm like, I'm playing on this. You know, my heroes, I say my heroes, you know, they're bands, they had a sound. It wasn't, you know, it's cool to have those guys, they're amazing and they can make a record. But and times change and evolve, you know, and here I am sort of kicking the door down with not thinking. I'm not trying to wreck the business or change things. I was adamant about, if I'm doing this, I trust, you know, try to trust me. You sign me for what I do. My band, they can play, and they let it happen. And Bitter End and all that, it sounded more like I wanted, more organic and more acoustic and whatever. And Bitter End really took off the charts. And anyway, I need to stop because you haven't asked a question. But that right there is where,
Well, I
after
think
that,
I think you're transitioning perfectly, because we're getting to the point to where all this stuff in Texas is starting to happen. And then you had a little bout where you had to take some time off, and all of a
Mhm.
sudden we've got the Texas music chart popping up, brand new Texas music chart. We have live from Billy Bob's CDs going out. We're filling up venues. We got our own radio chart. We're play and I was in radio, and I was
Where
there
were
for
you?
I was actually in down here on the coastal area in Bay
Okay.
City, Victoria,
Okay.
Corp area. But
Yeah.
yeah, I mean that's why Deryl Dodd, like, I love your music. I've always been a fan. But then look at you, Pearl Snaps comes out #1 on our Texas music chart. And
Yeah.
that was an exciting time for the Texas country music
Yeah.
industry then. Just being able to finally program that music and have a source to where, look, this is what we have. And then, I've talked about this with some of the other heritage Texas artists, to where it's like, back then we didn't have the digital downloads, we didn't have all that. We had CDX sending our radio releases, which were mainstream, and it was like literally going to the shows, getting the CDs to get the songs back to
Yeah.
the radio station to program them and play them. But that
Yeah.
was an exciting time, and you really came in, and I feel like you anchored a lot of artists as well
Mm.
in Texas country.
Wow. Well, that's cool to hear that, because on my side of things, like when Bitter End was out, and when I say these things about the label or this that, trust me, I have no malice or bitterness.
I know.
I
Right.
carried some of that for a while, but I've been healed from all that, and
Mhm.
to see all the beautiful things that happen. I'm thankful for everything and all those things. And you know, life is life, and business is business. And it's like, if you're gonna be in this business, this is where it's going. You know, you don't do what's not happening. You know, otherwise you're, you know. And first of all, I don't. But the thing is, I don't know if I'd gotten signed if Paul didn't know me. But see, he was there and then left, so that, you know, it changes things. Life happens. Ball bounces this way, and things change. But you just keep rolling with it. And now I look back and I think the mosaic of it all is perfect. The design of it all for me, and what I ultimately wanted to do was, like I say, connect with people. And somehow my songs were baked in values, what I grew up with, and the country thing, and the true country. I thought I was Huck Finn when I was growing up. I loved that whole thing,
Yes,
overalls
yes,
and cane
yes.
poles, and I grew up with that. So I'm still that, to be honest. I haven't grown up that much, but I so, you know, I with the label situation, it was really tough. I was seemed to be fighting everything when other labels and stuff are like, you know, even other artists like McGraw and I had become good friends, and he recorded a few of my songs, and I actually, well, I don't know if I want to tell that story, but um, I got literally just, my body broke down from personal things going on that were very tough. And then my dream, or, you know, that was seeming to happen, what I thought was sort of a destiny, I get there and then realize, you know, it's not at all working. I mean, I'm doing what I do, but I'm being asked or to be something completely different. And it just, you know, I did a lot of drinking to deal with it, you know, and that was just tearing me down. I was playing the shows, and the last 3 months before gotten really sick, I was playing with Charlie Daniels, and that was great because I was hanging out at a publishing company with a friend of mine, and actually a girl that I married was running the publishing company, and Charlie Daniels' manager, it was his company, David Corlew. So we just start hanging out in the office, and we're talking Leonard Skinner and 70s and touring and Merle Haggard, and it's just, I just feel like I was born too late, you know. Actually, to be honest about that, I think I fit in the 70s if I would have been born at that era. Linda Ronstadt and, you know, the Eagles, who were not the Eagles at the time, they were her band. J.D. Souther, Jackson Brown, I call it California country. Those harmonies and that kind of,
Yes.
you know, it's country, but it has a different thing. And the harmonies, I was like, man, because I loved that sound. But so where was I? I go along and I doing this tour with Charlie Daniels because his manager put me out there. He said, you need to be out. But, you know, my peers and everything were wonderful, but I think I fit more with like him because I'm an older soul or something at the time, you
Yes.
know, and I just, and Charlie he endorsed me, and it was for real. And I'd get up and play Stevie Ray or something with him. And he loved that, you know, and his band. And it was just a great 3 months. And then I got a tour with Tim McGraw and the Dixie Chicks. It was going to be Tim and them and then me. And the Chicks were on my label, and we got to be really good friends way back then. And Tim and I were friends. And then I had another tour with Brooks and Dunn, and then Trace Atkins, and then me. And I knew them. So I just, you know, I knew I was a player. So I knew all the guitar players and people who were the musicians. And it just all happened. And I woke up one morning, and I couldn't raise my hands over my head, and I just felt real heavy, and something wasn't right. And I went to the hospital. I drove to the hospital. While I'm driving, it's like the world just starts going like this, you know, and freaked me out quite a bit. And I got in the hallway, and I was just walking somewhere to an office to, hey, help me. And this lady actually was walking, a nurse, and she said, hello. And thank goodness for CMT, but she'd seen Memphis, or I only had 1 or 2 videos. But she recognized me. Are you Deryl? I said, yes. And she goes, you all right? I said, no. And so she took me into her, I don't know, physician, and they checked me out, and they said I had an ear infection. And I had a show in Houston that weekend. And when I heard that, I thought, oh, thank goodness, because I'm thinking, you know, all kind of things that could have been, and symptoms, you know, you read and you think about. So I went and did the show in Houston. But by then, I couldn't really even hold my guitar, but I was still standing there and singing. And my parents were there, and my mom said, we're going to get you checked out again. And we went and did that. And I spent a week in the hospital, and they finally found what was wrong by doing a spinal tap, I guess you'd call it. And they see the infection in the spinal fluid. And they said, your body's fighting it, and you're fine. You're going to be fine. You're not going to die. But all my motor skills were impaired big time. And all the playing, all the intricate stuff I could do never came back completely, you know. But the mental part of that was more than that, because the tours that were going to happen and all that gone. So you're at home in bed, just like it's all gone, and that's when it gets real. So for 3 or 4 months, I just was there and just pretty miserable. And I actually saw a television show at that time. This is, I don't know, 98, 99. It was Lance Armstrong, and it was early on when he had cancer and all these things, and he was in the hospital, and they were saying how you know, all this treatment, and he had all these tumors, and he beat it, and now he's riding his bike again. And something in that moment just made me go, oh, I can do that. And it did something to me. I'm getting emotional.
Love that.
So say something funny. That's what I say when I get like that. So I got the guitar, and just wanted to hold it. My hand would just shake, you know. And anyway, so I could play it, and started being able to play again. I went down in Nashville and started doing shows, just myself, and all these people were supportive. It was great. And I got going again. I got a band back together. And what you're saying is, after I was sick, I made an album, one more album with Sony, and I was on the major label, Columbia. And by now they they had started these independent labels, and they had Lucky Dog.
Yes.
Jack Ingram was there, and the Derailers, and Bruce and Charlie Robinson. And when I got well enough to make a record, I said, "Can I go over there?" Because and they were like, they were saying that's a demotion. I don't get it. No, maybe you call it whatever you want, but that way I can just make a record and play, and my band can play and can be loose and real. And so they let me make the Pearl Snaps album over there, and the whole Sundown thing. There's stories behind all that where I cut Sundown, and they didn't want it to be on the record because they didn't want any cover songs, but it went out to radio as an advance copy, and radio DJ programmers at that time had come over from rock and roll, and they saw Sundown, which was from Gordon Lightfoot in the 70s, right? So they went, I wonder if that's the same song in that. And they heard my version and they liked it, and they just started playing like an old school. It was playing, it started charting, and my album wasn't even out, and they didn't want the song on the thing. But so there was a whole thing where they sent cease and desist orders to radio to stop playing that song, or they'd sue you.
Thanks so much for tuning in and listening to just the first half of our visit with Deryl Dodd. Make sure you tune in next Tuesday for the second half because it just gets better and better.